we kind of have to break down where everything is headed first. And to give the very quick basic definition, everything we know is going digital. A lot of people think, well, we're already living in a digital world. Well, not compared to where we're headed.
Hi, welcome to today's webinar, hosted by myself, Andrea Thompson. I'm a certified financial planner and founder of Modern Sense, a virtual advice-only financial planning firm. One of the reasons that I called my firm Modern Sense is that I wanted to take a forward-thinking approach to finance through technology, thought leadership, and innovation. So today, I'm thrilled to introduce who I believe to be one of today's underground leaders, Skyler Senkowski. Sky is the owner of Ascend Crypto, a consulting firm dedicated to empowering crypto investors at every stage of their crypto investment journey. Skyler and I met at our co-working space and immediately were able to find common ground with our mutual interest in the world of cryptocurrency. Personally, I have been interested and dabbling in the world of crypto since 2015 without dedicating any true significant time and effort into ongoing research and understanding of this ever-evolving space. Skyler's work goes above and beyond what is crypto, as his mission is to empower investors to consider how this seemingly speculative asset class could become more than what it appears at face value. He's here today to discuss how cryptocurrency fits into today's landscape and how a novice investor should think about entering into the foray. So with all of that being said, welcome, Skyler.
Happy to be here.
Hi. So first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you and what is Ascend Crypto?
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. So I came from investing just from stocks and ETFs, stuff like that. And when that started a number of years ago, that kind of led me down my crypto journey. So that's how I got here, and that's how Ascend Crypto got created. I taught myself everything you need to know about crypto. And so one of the reasons I started Ascend Crypto is because a lot of people, they may not have the time of day to learn all the stuff that I had to learn. So I would learn everything I need to about 2017, 2018. I would do it after my own work. And so Ascend Crypto was meant to help others, like you mentioned in the intro, to empower them in ways to help them speed up their journey and help them learn the info they need. So I kind of want to streamline that process for them. So that way they didn't have to go through what I had to go through, where I had to get all my information from bits and pieces from here and there. So now everything they need is just a one condensed spot, so they can get ahead of the curve, so to speak. And what I like to call is, I don't want to say learn the right way, because there is no really right way of learning, but kind of learn the info that I had to learn by weaving in and out, kind of streamline for them, where there's a lot of noise in crypto. So part of the Ascend Crypto was to make sure that they have the right mindset going in and what to look for, so to speak, because this whole space is going to change the world as we know it, and no show can at all in there. And so Ascend Crypto was meant to help them be a part of that big transition happening so they can nail it going forward.
That all sounds amazing. And I think, what you said is at the start of that, there is so much information out there. How is someone who is beginner or novice to the space even supposed to understand where to start? I mean, the internet is a big, black hole of information, and there's a lot of wonderful information out there, but sometimes even as an investor in a regular investment world, it's hard to discern the good from the bad. Which sources do you take at face value and which ones should you edit out? Yeah. So it sounds like Ascend has been set up sort of to help the investor in filtering out what they ought not to be listening to, and to be filtering in the information that you're curating for them. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, exactly. I mean, Chat GDP didn't exist when I first started. So nowadays people can just hop on and have AI tell them everything, to what it's coded for, at least, right? But that's exactly it. So the whole point of this is, in my style of teaching and in my consulting, it's more so teaching them what I've learned, and what I learned is following the money. So I follow big institutions. I follow what governments are doing, what they're saying and doing. And then when you start diving into that research, you start figuring out that there's a big disconnect between what people in crypto right now think is going on versus what institutions and governments are doing with this technology. So obviously follow the money, because that's where everything's headed, not what retail thinks is, like big institutions. And again, there's controversy with that, because people in crypto kind of want to take down the institutions. So that's where there can be a disconnect. So Ascend Crypto is catered to following the money, because in my opinion, and I think a lot of people in finance and investing could agree with this, is you follow the money because that shows you where everything's headed. So that's kind of what Ascend Crypto is
Yeah.
based on.
Yeah, it's the basic laws of supply and demand in a way, and if demand is happening over here, then we need to see what's going on,
Yep.
and really why this isn't just looking at, oh, Bitcoin, that's cute.
Yeah.
So with that being said, like, let's take a step back. What is cryptocurrency? And I think, and maybe this is a wrong sentiment, but maybe that term or that verb is a bit of an outdated terminology. So, and just to sort of preface today's webinar, we're not going to be getting into the intricacies of what is the blockchain and how does it work, but I really want to focus on, cryptocurrency as an investment. So maybe just take that or destigmatize that for the viewers, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And as much as we're not going to get into the intricacy, and I can't even say that word, intricacies of it, it's good. It's good to mention exactly what blockchain is because we're going to give a basic definition of it because it does help separate what crypto is. So what I want people to understand is blockchain is just a digital ledger. It helps transact information, and a crypto, or you can say cryptocurrency, and that is a form of value that is on the blockchain. So if blockchain transacts information and moves information from point A to point B, then the crypto is the representation of that value that's associated with that information being moved. So a metaphor I like to use with that is picture a train track and a train analogy. So the blockchain will be the train tracks, the infrastructure to move, and crypto will be the train. So what's moving across that infrastructure. Now, cryptocurrency definitely is a little bit of an outdated term because in the early days of crypto, a lot of the crypto projects coming out were quote unquote currencies. They're meant to rival dollars and cents and stuff like that. So fiat currency. Nowadays, you can consider crypto a digital asset. So what I like to call is you can say cryptocurrency, you can say crypto, but where we're headed is digital assets. And a digital asset is simply is just, again, a form of digital value on the blockchain. And it's no longer just a currency where I send you, Andrea, Bitcoin because I owe you money for coffee. That's what the currency kind of is, right? Instead of sending you like a bank transfer, an e-transfer. Whereas now we're representing physical real world assets onto the blockchain. And that's what crypto is now. It is a form of a digital asset. And that's where everything's headed. So that's actually a good thing to mention right at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think that is a really important differentiation for anyone that I've spoken to who is a bit of a novice in the world of cryptocurrency. I think the idea generally for most people is that it is still some form of payment where we're paying for something using Bitcoin because that was the initial use case, let's say, of where people used Bitcoin back in the day. But where it's gone to is somewhere completely different than where it began. And I think that's a very important differentiation and probably the hardest concept for individuals to grasp is that we're not talking about a currency anymore. We're really talking about, what is, and maybe this leads me into my next question that you can answer for everyone, but what is the difference between what used to be cryptocurrency and now digital assets, blockchain technology, coins, tokens? There's so much terminology out there. So how should someone better understand all of these terms? And maybe what are the most important ones to grasp onto today?
Well, again, Chat GDP didn't exist when I first started, but I think it's a great way for people to get started to understand the differences. Like if you just plug into the
Yeah.
AI, like explain to me the basic definitions of all these different types, it'll spew it out for them. So I really grasp Chat GDP for that sense for beginners because it can really streamline their information for them. Now, to go deeper into your question, to think of a crypto token or cryptocurrency versus a digital asset, we kind of have to break down where everything is headed first. And to give the very quick basic definition, everything we know is going digital. A lot of people think, well, we're already living in a digital world. Well, not compared to where we're headed. And what I mean is every single asset we have in the world today is going to become tokenized onto blockchain. So tokenization is just a process of taking an asset and putting it onto the blockchain. An example of that would be, say, a stock. Say Google will tokenize all their stocks. So you're no longer buying just stock on your like Questrade account or your Wealthsimple account. Now you're actually buying a tokenized version of that stock on the blockchain. And that technology speeds things up on the back end, which we won't get too deep into right now. But that's a good example. If you tokenize a Google stock, that is technically a crypto or a digital asset. So it's a form of value, an asset. versus a cryptocurrency would be like Bitcoin that I'm just trying to transact value like money, so to speak. So that's one of the important things to understand is that and the difference is you have an asset versus just a cryptocurrency, like a currency. So asset versus currency. In the long
Yeah,
term, especially with tokenization taking every value in the world and putting it on the blockchain, it's the asset part that people are going to want to look into. And that's what they're really want to study. So if they're going to get started, like you mentioned in your question, I would definitely start with the crypto assets side, not the currency side. So there is a big difference. Now, keep in mind, like you could have crypto projects that work with assets that can be used as currency as well. So that's just an added bonus, but that's not its main use case. So again, people
of
starting
course.
currency versus asset, and that's where I would start with the asset side.
Yeah, and I love your example using Google Shares as a token. I think for someone who's an investor, this might be a really good example to be able to latch onto. So right now, if you're trading Google Shares, it's done through an exchange during market hours, and it takes a few days to settle that trade. I think from what you have told me in the past is that once you tokenize, let's say those Google shares, that will be an instantaneous transaction where the ownership lives on the digital ledger and switches ownership from person A to person B anonymously during that transaction. Was that a fair representation?
That is a perfect representation. And a perfect example of that is there's a company called the Deposited Trust and Clearing Corporation, the DTCC. I like to call them the company that no one's ever heard of. They're kind of behind the scenes, but they're what settle securities trades around the world, right? And this is just for the people listening in who haven't heard of it before. In 2022, they settled around $2.64 quadrillion in securities, right? And keep
Oh
in
my
mind,
gosh.
if I were to write a quadrillion dollars on a board, our human mind cannot comprehend how big of a number that is, right? So 2.64 quadrillion, and keep in mind that the 0.64 part is 640 trillion. So these are numbers that are
Sheesh.
unfathomable. What they do behind the scenes is they have to transfer the stock from persons. Say you're in Questrade and someone in Wealthsimple bought it. Well, now they got to send the stock from Questrade to Wealthsimple. But then Questrade uses, I think, CIBC Bank, and say Wealthsimple is using RBC Bank. Well, that payment has to go from one bank to another. So now you have four institutions involved. And that's where tokenizing comes in play because everything can be settled instantly across the blockchain because it's borderless and it's timeless. So it can go in near instant time. And that is kind of what tokenization does and the power of it. So now when people buy stocks now, so especially the people you work with, all they see is like numbers on a screen, but they don't know that behind the scenes actually takes 2 or 3 days to settle and actually go into the accounts, like you mentioned. So when we're investing in crypto, and that's the asset side I mentioned it because that's a huge use case, taking the settlement time from 2 or 3 days down to like 4 seconds, and all four parties are instantaneously like connected to each other instead of having to be separate. So that's kind of goes into our first couple of questions is what to look for. So that's what I mean by the asset side.
Mhm. There's so much we could unpack even in
Yeah.
just what you said there.
Yeah, I
Like we
know,
can
right?
spend like hours just talking about that.
Yeah.
And so much of what you said has my mind spinning in a bunch of different directions. There
That
are a lot
that
of
means I'm doing my
considerations.
job then, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of considerations that I think would scare people in what you just said. That being said, I think part of the education purpose of Ascend Crypto is to destigmatize a lot of that information and really empower investors to feel confident to make those decisions to enter into the world of digital assets. But I want to take a sort of a step back because I think we talked a little bit about cryptocurrency and its initial use case as a currency. But generally speaking, we're talking follow the money in economics. What is the economic purpose of the blockchain itself?
So I would break it down into two main parts. The economic purpose, number one, is transparency. So on a blockchain, every transaction is broadcasted so anyone can view. You could have a public network like that or a private one. So obviously, if the bank is using the technology, they don't want all their transactions broadcasted. But economically, it can add transparency in situations where it's best to showcase it, right? And the other main one is speed and settlement. So one of the biggest economic impacts is again what I just mentioned with that stock example is that what we see are just numbers on an account. But for these major institutions who are sending billions of dollars a day, their time to do so and have their books settled, because remember it's all accounting, goes from 2 or 3 days down to 4 seconds. or five, yeah, around that time. So that is the biggest economic impact of blockchain, and add to the fact that it's borderless. So all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you're if a bank in Europe is sending money to, I'm just giving this as an example, by the way, to illustrate the economic example. If a bank in Europe is sending money to a bank in the US, they're 2 to 3 days to settle, and they got to deal with cross currencies because there's two different borders, two different currencies with the euro and the US dollar. Now with blockchain, that could be settled and swapped within 4 seconds. So it's a basically speeds things up and unlocks all that idle money that's sitting there waiting to be sent. So it's a major economic impact, and it's in the trillions and trillions of dollars each and every day that it actually unlocks.
That's incredible, and I'm sure would be very beneficial for many in many use cases that I can think of.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about it as an investor, who, and I know the answer, that who owns the blockchain? So if the blockchain is going to be the driver of all of that economic value, but in a way the blockchain itself is decentralized, then who's the winner for owning the railroad, if you will?
So the winner, can you break it down really quickly before we answer that question? So you can have a blockchain that's
Sure.
private. So say Scotiabank wants to have their own network for internal use. So it's their own private. No one else can really see the transactions because they want to keep their information private, obviously, right? So their winner would be them because it's their own network, it's in house, and they can control it, and that's fine. And a lot of people in crypto nowadays would say that's not what crypto is about, but that's what the technology offers them. So, in that sense, if you're your own big enterprise or your own big institution, you're the winner by using your own network or a private network of someone else's. Now, for a public decentralized one, the winner of that would really be the people using it and the people who bought the crypto facilitating that value early on when it was worth nothing. So all of a sudden, that network is facilitating trillions of dollars a day, and it could be any value. So it doesn't have to be money. It could be tokenization of assets like homes, cars, stocks, right? So if they bought that token early and it's facilitating all that value now, that's the real winner. But again, like I mentioned, the other winner of a public one are the users themselves, because let's give another example of this. Say the International Monetary Fund. I know I don't want to get too technical for people here, but they control, hypothetically, a pool of money for all central banks to tap into. So all these banks in the world want to send money to each other. They could have a private version of that, hypothetically, where public can't see, but the banks can see. And in that pool, if they run it on a blockchain with the crypto, no bank owns that network. So every bank tapping into it knows that it's a fair network for them all. And that's kind of where the winning happens, where it's trustless, it's called. So I don't have to trust you, Andrea, that, hey, I'm on your network, and I got to trust that you're making sure it's right and everything. But we're on this one big one together, and no one really owns it, and we're going to use it equally. So that's kind of where one of the biggest winners are. And I'm thinking institutionally with that, of course.
Of course, yeah. And the institutions control the money flow of the world, and it's in their best interest to make it happen more quickly and with less cost to themselves, which is why they're creating their own blockchain technology in-house.
Yeah.
That being said, are they utilizing currently available tokens to be able to facilitate their own in-house blockchain technology? What's happening on that front?
Yeah, absolutely they are. So there are a couple of crypto projects right now who are actually consortiums of these major institutions where they all came together and created their own network and their own crypto token. And that kind of goes really well with one of the previous questions we answered, because a lot of people who are traditional in crypto, and I say that quote unquote, they view that as anti-crypto. Because why are these institutions in there? This is just supposed to be for us to use. But no, they're using the technology. So I'm actually going to screen share if you don't mind. And it's a
Sure.
perfect example of this, of who's using it. Can you see this?
I can.
Perfect. So this is a project called Hedera, and anyone can buy the Hedera token. And this is what I want to perfectly showcase, because you can see Hedera is governed by the world's leading organizations. These companies are all part of Hedera's consortium. So all these companies run a node on the network, and they can contribute to it, and they run it. So you can see here some of the institutions who are already creating their own. You got Boeing, Google, Hitachi, IBM, Dell Technologies. You have DBS, Deutsche Telekom, the parent company for Verizon and T-Mobile. You have EDF, which is France's largest electric producing company, Tata Communications, which is Japan's largest telecommunications company, Ubisoft. You can see all these names. People can search up in
Mhm.
their own time. You even have a couple banks here. So this is a perfect example of it because this is what companies are doing. They're kind of banding together to create their own network, and anyone can buy the Hedera token now because it is a public token. However, the network itself
Right.
is controlled by those companies.
And it looked like on that diagram you showed that there were some empty seats. Is
Yes.
there a limitation to how many organizations can control Hedera in that example?
Yes. So Hedera has a set limit of companies or nodes that they're going to run, and they're trying to find the best fits of who can join the consensus. And they're looking for obviously different companies across different industries. Um, so once that limit's reached, one will have to drop out in order for another one to come in. So right now they haven't reached that limit, but
Gotcha.
they're slowly adding to it. Hitachi is one of the most recent additions. So I mentioned that, and when we're going through the list, but it's slowly adding on. But I got some big
So when
names
you're
there, like
talking,
Google.
yeah, when you're talking about following the money, and is this an example of what you would mean? So all of these, massive corporations are joining the consortium to, have some say in what happens with back to that particular digital asset. Um, is that an example of the type of work that you do with investors?
Yes, exactly. And that's kind of the research I post for subscribers as well, so I can showcase it. I'll give a quick example of this because this really hits home, especially with the previous questions we asked. So everyone just saw Google's consortium there. And if I go here, you don't have to understand exactly the stuff that Hedera is doing, but I want to turn everyone's attention to the section of application use cases. So here you see content authenticity, an audit log, decentralized identity. You have NFTs, payments. These are central bank digital currencies. So what I'm trying to say with, especially with following the money and the research I post, is you look at the company and who's backing it and who's partnered with it. So obviously Hedera has some major, major names associated with it. And then you look at it as use cases. So this is also following the money because you want to see why are all these major companies working with this project or why did they create it? You can see here, you can just imagine how much money is involved with all these use cases here. And they're talking about users of not only individuals, but they're targeting enterprises and governments and stuff. So this is a perfect example of what I mean by follow the money and some of the research we look into and want other people to realize they can do too. Is who is partner with the project, who's backing it, and what are they doing, and how much money is involved with what they're doing, right? So that little graph we just showed is a perfect example of all the use cases, and what we looked at before with all the big money backing it is another perfect example. Because in the long run, uh, those enterprises are in it for the long game, and that is kind of as an investor what I want to see is who can take this project to the end, and the end being, I mean, we'll probably touch upon this later on here, but crypto regulations are coming by governments. So that'll be rules, laws, regulations of what companies can and can't do, and the bigger picture of what's called Web3. So you want to make sure you hit a crypto project that is going to be on the good side of those regulations, right? So if you look at Hedera's governing council with Google, IBM, Boeing, Hitachi, right? Logic would say in investing that those companies know what they're doing, right? Especially as a team, and their use case matches what the world needs, and that's what I mean by following the money.
Got it. So that, and it makes so much sense as to why Ascend exists, because how is the everyday investor supposed to piece all of this together?
Yep,
It's
especially
nearly
with mainstream media only portraying Bitcoin. So this stuff's not really shown
exactly.
or on social media feeds like you mentioned before. So this stuff is
Yeah.
kind of, I don't want to call it hidden in plain sight, but it kind of really is.
Well, you just have to, open the door a little bit and dive down the rabbit hole, which I'm sure you've done. And 99% of people will have no idea or have never heard of Hedera or a consortium or an enterprise alliance or any of those terms. So
Yep.
that's why I think it's important for anyone who's considering as an investor into the world of digital assets to really truly understand what it is that they're investing in. So I wanted to kind of take that conversation in that direction. The people that we would traditionally work with, let's say in financial planning and investment advising, are used to investing in the general, traditional equity markets and real estate and whatnot. How do we take those types, how do we take the idea of investing in those types of things, which are, have true tangible value to them, we can hold a stock certificate, we can touch the bricks of our home, we can hold a gold bar. How do we extrapolate that into the world of investing in digital assets for an investor who is just not certain as to how they can feel the tangibility of that asset?
Really great question. So hypothetically speaking, when not if, when stocks become tokenized, those certificates will still exist. But however, that certificate will be tied to the digital version of it, which is on the blockchain. So that'd be proof of ownership. So as another example, say in the near future, real estate will become tokenized, and that includes the deeds to real estate. So the certificate of a home or the deed will be tokenized on the blockchain as its own like NFT or token. And that will still come with a physical copy, but that physical copy will be tied to the digital version, right? So now all of a
Got
sudden
it.
you can still have the physical proof of it, however, it'll be tied digitally online to the digitized version of it. So that connection will still exist, especially with the tangible asset. If you buy tokenized gold, you'll still have the physical counterpart that is tied to that specific share, digitized, of course. So that would still exist. And just keep in mind, especially this is a really good question to bring this up in this context. And I mean, all crypto does is speeds things up and it makes things faster and unlocks value quicker. So what I like to tell people is the new system that's coming with DLT, it's called, or blockchain, is it's really going to be no different than the system we have now, especially in terms of like the physical assets tied to the online version. The only thing it does is makes things way quicker, which is why they're all getting ready for it. So that is
Right.
a really good question because a lot of people do think about that. Well, if everything's digital, blah, blah. In a kind of way, everything already is digital. However, we still have the
Yep.
physical versions tied to it, and crypto will be no different.
Kind of going back into what we were talking about, we were really talking about the mechanics of what blockchain is and how it works behind the scenes. Now I want to transition a little bit more into talking about it as an investment. And, for the people that are listening to this who are thinking about, okay, this all sounds really interesting, but I've never done this before. How should someone approach investing in blockchain, either as a percentage of their net worth or otherwise? And how risky is that?
So to start, my uncle actually worked for HSBC Bank downtown for his entire career, and one of his best investment theses, because he was on the trading floor, is if you go
Mm-hmm.
to bed at night and you think about your investments, you're overinvested. If you go to bed at night and you sleep soundly, you're good, or you're
Good.
underinvested actually. So that's the benchmark I like to use for anyone. If anyone's like trying to decide how much do I put in, it's whatever lets you go to bed and sleep at night, right? So if you can get a good
Yeah.
night's sleep and you're not worrying about it at a time where most people worry about things, right? That is kind of like a benchmark I like to say. Again, it's not exactly financial advice, so people need to figure out what level that is for them. It could be $100,
Right.
it could be 1,000, it could be 10,000, it could be more, right? It's all about the own personal level, and also like I would take into consideration their own like where they're at in their life. So some people with a family who might have to be more budget conscious, right? They might want to be careful with how much they put in, regardless if they're comfortable with it. If that makes sense. Versus someone
Yeah,
who's
for
like
sure.
19-year-old, has university paid, and they're working a part time job. They have more money to put in. They could afford that risk technically, so to speak. So again, it all depends on life situation, but my benchmark is your what percentage goes in is what makes you comfortable and you sleep at night with.
That's fair. And the way that I've always tried to describe it to clients is in a crude way, I call it toilet money. So the way that I've always seen it is it's a more speculative investment class at this point. So any money that you're willing to flush down the toilet is the amount that you ought to be putting at risk. Now, that is coming at it from a standpoint where the investor truly maybe is quite green to the area, doesn't have a lot of acumen or a lot of knowledge around what they're investing in. So I think, if somebody is a little bit more literate around blockchain technology, digital assets, and feels more comfortable, they might be willing to put more capital at risk, having the financial literacy behind them. And as a planner, I would always approach this as money that you will not need tomorrow. So any money that you might need for any short-term purpose, I would never allocate to a speculative asset class. Just as a planner note inside of that. And is it risky? So I say this because often the conversations that I get into with clients, we're talking a lot about risk. And, for a lot of people, risk means loss of capital. So, how risky is investing in blockchain at this stage?
It honestly depends on the thesis the person's going in with. So, to give an easy example, the majority of people in crypto right now, they do believe that they're going to take down the banks with Bitcoin and meme coins, so to speak. Now, if you invest in meme coins, that could be very, very risky because when meme coins pump and they go really, really up in value, and some people are making a ton of money, that's where it can get risky because people who are hopping in, that's going to come crashing right back down. We've seen that time and time again. So that's when the risk comes in because those projects aren't set up for long-term success. They're just set up for short-term pumps so people who bought in really early can get some money from people who are buying in. So they're cashing out
Right.
when the horde's trying to buy in, and people who are buying in are going to get they're going to get slammed in the end because they're going to be the ones who lose their money when the project loses value because there's nothing to it, right?
Right.
Now, if you're doing the heavy research, like I mentioned earlier in part one, back when I had my beard, right? We should probably mention that to people before we continue. Like, why does he look so different? So part two was a few days later. I totally skipped my mind to not shave, but it happened.
It's
um,
all good.
so if you do the research, like I said in part one, when you're looking to follow the money and you're researching the projects and you're realizing this is what the technology is doing, this is who they're helping, who he's really the partner with, that kind of solidifies it and narrows down the risk, in my opinion. And it narrows down the risk because the foundation of that project is way more solid, and there's companies backing it that makes it look like there's a very, very strong future. So you want the project to go through and through, especially you want it to last post regulations. So if these projects have amazing partnerships with governments, with Fortune 500 companies, those companies and governments are obviously in the know. So that's where I like to park my money to mitigate my risk because after regulations, when governments come in and say this is allowed, this is not allowed, as much as people don't like to hear that, it's going to drastically change the crypto landscape. So where I put my
Fair.
money is on which side regulations will this project be on. So that's kind of one of the ways to mitigate the risk.
Right. And just to demystify the term meme coin,
Yeah.
for those listening, maybe you can give an example of a meme coin versus maybe a stable coin or something that you would envision to be on the right side of regulation.
Sure. So the easiest meme coin example to give is Dogecoin because everyone's heard about it in the media, and that's the one Elon Musk has pumped before. So a meme coin is basically just a joke. It's a meme. And there's nothing to the project other than it simply just exists as a joke. And there's a coin to it, and people just buy the coin and hoping it rises in value. It's all based on hope. And to me, it's not structured well at all because there's no technology to the project other than people can buy the token and send it to each other. That's it. And so, how long is that really going to last for? Now, a stable coin is a token that does not move in value. So, an example would be a US dollar stable coin. So, like USDC, which is called Circle. And that price of that token is always $1, and that's one US dollar. So, you can just buy a crypto version of the US dollar. So, that one doesn't move in price versus the meme tokens will.
Got it. And then something like Bitcoin, where would that fall on the spectrum?
So Bitcoin falls under the OG. It's the original one. And right now it is the strongest one in crypto because it has all the eyes on it and stuff. But
Yes.
it honestly follows a very similar structure to these meme tokens because the purpose of Bitcoin is just send money peer to peer, like between me and you and Andrea. And that's really all there all is to it. It doesn't do it very well because it's super slow. It doesn't allow other things to be built on it because the network isn't structured very well. It's just top right now. It's the OG because it has first mover advantage. So that's another thing that ties into your risk question. People can buy Bitcoin, sure. A lot of eyes are on it. Even BlackRock, as you know, they started their Bitcoin ETF fund. So that could make it post regulations. But in terms of what I see having the most gains, it'd be the other ones with the heavy research attached to it.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. Interestingly, I had a conversation this weekend with someone who shall remain unnamed, who is really interested right now in Bitcoin because of the halving that's going to be taking place in the summer. Can you talk about what that means for Bitcoin? And in fact, does that drive more value to that coin?
Oh yeah, halving just basically means that the rewards that are going to be dished out to miners are going to be cut in half. So it's a halving. So it basically means Bitcoin is going to become more scarce. So obviously, if it becomes more scarce, the higher the price theoretically, and it has proven in past times. So with that halving coming up, people are anticipating a scarcer supply of Bitcoin or even a circulating supply because again, Bitcoin's capped at 21 million, and the miners are trying to reach that 21 million point because not all Bitcoin are in circulation. So the halving is just they receive fewer and fewer rewards as we get closer to that 21 million mark where all the Bitcoin are out.
Got it. Yeah. And we won't go into the history of Bitcoin and the 21 million mark
Yeah.
today, but that's a well publicized point that anyone can go and look up. I'll include it in the show notes today as well. So just sort of to get off of Bitcoin for a second, how should someone who is considering investing in the blockchain decide between the products like the one that you just mentioned, where different product manufacturers are now coming out with ETFs where you can buy the actual either Bitcoin or Ethereum directly through the product provider versus holding the actual stuff through a crypto exchange in a wallet, for example. Can you talk about the differences between the two and why should someone do one versus the other, or is there an advantage?
For sure. So, like anything, there's pros and cons to everything depending on the situation someone's in. So, let's say you're someone and you want to park $100,000 in Bitcoin. You don't care about the other ones. You go, do you know what? Bitcoin's a store of value. I just want to put $100,000 in. I want to make sure it's safe, right? Someone with that investment thesis might be better off. Again, not financial advice, just speaking out of opinion here. If you buy in the ETF, like a BlackRock ETF or a Grayscale ETF, you can buy in your stock account, and people already have that set up. So it's so much easier for them to purchase it. Now, if you're in Canada, you have a tax-free savings account. So if you have money in there, you can actually buy Bitcoin or certain cryptos like Ethereum into your tax-free savings account. So if you want to buy those two and you want to just put in your stock account and make it super easy for you without having to set up anything crypto related, then that's the easiest way for you to do it. Now, when you buy the ETF stock or the share, right, that is a representation of a portion of Bitcoin or Ethereum. We'll just say Bitcoin for now. So you're not the holder of that Bitcoin. Someone else is. You're not custodying it. Someone else is. Now, if you had your own money and you want to set up your own crypto stuff, if you bought everything on your own and stored it on your own storage, on your own wallet, you have 100% access. You're your own bank. And so that's where there are the pros and cons, because if you want to be your own bank, it's a little tedious to set up. So it all depends on if you're willing to go through that little tedious learning curve to make sure you learn how to do it properly. But if
Yeah.
you just want the easiness and you want your tax-free savings account, yeah, just buy the share, right? Now, one other thing to
Yeah.
mention is there's a difference between those two. And the third one a lot of people do, and I would definitely not recommend, is they buy the crypto on the crypto exchange. So they make an account, they set the e-transfer money in, and they leave it on the exchange. So I told some people in our office, Andrew, this quote, and I think it's really good for your followers to listen to too. If you're buying crypto, so say you choose not to do it on the stock and you want to just buy it on the exchange, treat a crypto exchange like a public washroom. You want to get in, do what you need to do, get out, but don't linger. So if you leave your crypto on the exchange, you're lingering. And a few years ago, FTX exchange collapsed, and all the users who left their crypto on that exchange, they lost it all. That's because they're not
Mhm.
holding their crypto. Someone else was holding it and they lost it all. So that's the
Yeah.
risk associated. Now, if you're going to buy the Bitcoin ETF, there's obviously legal regulations tied to that, like heavy legal regulations. There's insurance tied to it. So you're a little bit more covered, right? So my short answer now to that long answer I just gave to your question is it all depends on
Mhm.
the person's investment thesis and what they're looking to do.
Totally fair. And just because I've done a bit of research into the options available through the exchange traded fund route, you cannot buy the landscape of tokens and coins that you can buy if you went direct and bought them on the exchange. So at least currently, it seems to be rather limited to Bitcoin and Ethereum. Are there
Yes.
any others that you're aware of?
For the ETFs,
Yeah.
right now I'm only aware of Bitcoin and Ethereum, but they're looking to make an XRP one as well. So it looks like it's
Okay.
coming.
That's Ripple.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I think for most clients who are looking to get into it and who aren't sure about, setting up a relationship with an exchange, which if you've done it before, it's a lot of work and still a pretty intensive process to get set up, verification of identification, etc. Um, buying the ETF is not a bad way of going about it. However, like I just mentioned, it is somewhat limiting from an options perspective. There are also ETFs that buy the companies that are investing in Bitcoin and in blockchain. So those are also out there and are interesting because they are already publicly listed companies that either are involved in the infrastructure support of blockchain technology or they're directly investing in blockchain itself. So that's also an interesting angle to look at from an investment standpoint. You mentioned wallets before. If someone was going direct to an exchange to buy their own tokens or coins, what type of wallet should they look for, and where should they look to source this?
So there are some that are, in my opinion, better than others. So Amazon sells a lot of them, and that is more reputable because this is a good, it's actually a good segue to protect your own wallet because if you buy it from a seller that's a little sketchy, they can actually tamper with it. You don't even know. But on
Oh my
Amazon,
gosh.
you actually have, yeah, on Amazon, you actually have the actual company selling on Amazon. So it's straight from them. So
Okay.
that's what I like about Amazon. I guess it depends on where in the world you're from, but at least here in Canada and the United States, they have that option that's really easy. One of the best
Mm-hmm.
wallets, in my opinion, is Ledger Nano. And that
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit tedious to set up, but they have videos on their website on how to do it all. And that one is this looks like a USB key. And that one is stored offline. So like you need to attach
Okay.
your key, put your passwords in, set it all up, and then you can access it through the Ledger Live app. And that is super secure because it's very hard for not hard, it's impossible for someone to hack that unless they have your passwords. Now, if
Okay.
someone wants an easier route, they could download a desktop wallet or mobile wallet. So, say like there's one called Exodus. They could buy it for their laptop, or they can get it on their phone. And that one isn't cold storage, so it's not offline. It's considered a quote unquote a hot wallet because it's on your phone, and it's easy to set up. You don't need to keep plugging the little USB key in every time you need to move your crypto. But the downside is if I get your password on your phone, I can just go on that app and transfer your crypto out. So like
Right.
if
Oh,
someone has an old laptop and it's just sitting at home and it's safe there and they just want to have the easiest way possible, they can download an Exodus on their old laptop that stays at home. And that could be a theoretical, like a decent way to store your crypto that's in your own hands.
I've heard horror stories about this where people have done that and then either lost the computer or can't
Yeah.
get into the computer and it's lost. And there's a lot of, I think, older Bitcoin users that wish they could
Yeah.
find, the old laptop where or get into it so they could access their millions of dollars. So I think, yes, easier, but probably not the best route if you were going to rely on hardware
Yeah.
to sustain us in that
Yeah,
situation.
exactly.
Um, yeah. So which one do you use, by the way? I'm curious.
I use Ledger Nano. So
You
I
do.
use
Okay.
Ledger Nano X, and I have a different bunch of different ones. So I store it across different wallets because I obviously do a lot, right?
Yep.
But for people starting, you can just purchase look into at least the Ledger Nano X because it has a lot of storage, so you can have a lot of crypto apps downloaded, and they have a lot of
Yep.
availability for which cryptos they can store. And the Ledger Live
Cool.
app for desktop is super easy to use.
Okay. Thanks for the tip.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Always like to know what the experts are using because that's the one that I'm going to buy. Okay. So I think a really interesting thing about investing in Bitcoin, or sorry, I keep saying Bitcoin, about
Oh,
investing in
that's okay.
blockchain is investing itself in general, typically is something where we should approach it less like gambling and more like a long-term wealth creation proposition. So, how should someone who's investing in blockchain evaluate when to sell? So, where's the exit point? Often, as we've seen, historically in crypto, there can be very significant peaks and valleys that have occurred. So, how should someone look to approach profit taking from investing in a blockchain?
So my favorite way, and it's the age-old method of gut feeling. So I always sell on a gut feeling, but keep in mind my investment thesis is very different to most people in crypto. So a lot of people are just looking for that short-term gains, meme coin pumps, so to speak. Where, like you mentioned, we're doing the long-term investing. So I'm gonna break my my thesis down, and people can see if it resonates with them. So for me, like I've been buying since 2017, and in the last few bull runs, I did sell a little bit. Obviously, you take profits when you see it's time and you're making money. And like I had student loans I had to pay off, and that so when I could see I saw I could pay off a good chunk, yeah, gone, right? So it depends on your
Yep.
own life situation. You don't want to hold through and through and then watch it crash back down and miss out, right? So what I'm doing is, yeah, when we're going up, I'm selling the bits here and there because I do buy when it's low or when I perceive it to be low. And then when it goes up, yeah, I'm going to sell. The majority, so I want to keep a large percentage for me, is for post regulations. And the reason being is I understand there's all these ups and downs in the short term, month to month, even week to week. Um, I do have a little percentage that does cater to that where I'm like, okay, I'm willing to sell this. But for me, the majority of it is for the long term. And again, regulations are coming this year, and what's happening is based on the research is we have all these companies and governments building their own blockchain and crypto systems and working with the ones that are out there today. So it's like there's a Formula One race going on, and everyone's building their Formula One cars, and they're all at the start line, and they're waiting for the regulations to give the green light, and the race goes on, right? Now, when that happens, everyone in the world's gonna be like, "Oh wait, there's a race going on. We got to build a car." So they're gonna be behind. Now, what that signifies in our metaphor is when the lights go out and the race cars go, that's all the money in the world diving into this technology. So that's why my long-term investment is do the heavy research, figure out the ones being used in this new system with the really good technology, and then hopefully, not well, fingers crossed, based on the research, is they're going to capture a large portion of that value coming in after regulations. So that's why I don't want to sell too much right now, but that's my own thesis, right? Some people like to maybe want to do 50-50, 50% long-term, 50%, yeah, I'll sell now. But for me, I see, well, keep in mind, I'm a little biased because I've done the heavy research, right? So that's why I want to hold my majority for post-regulations. So that's what I'll be selling.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, having a thesis, and specifically, not when it comes to broad-based investing, I think, but when it comes to perhaps more individual security selection, if we're talking about traditional investing or investing in blockchain technology, having a strong thesis, almost like a business plan that you can follow, so that you don't become emotionally invested in what's happening, good or bad, I think is a really, really important metric. You can get really hurt by your own reactions to things. So I think if you have a solid, again, thesis as to when you want to take profits, how that should happen, and what it's contingent on, I think is a really important way of approaching investing in blockchain, because otherwise you're going to end up riding the peaks and valleys and reacting rather than being proactive.
No, that's
So I
bang on.
think, having that proactive approach in general is super important. So couldn't have said it better myself. And I want to deviate for a minute because I think you said something that's really important about regulations. And regulations you and I have talked about before, but I think it's something that is really fundamental as to why we should become an investor in blockchain. So talk to me a little bit about regulations, where they stand, and what's coming up in 2024.
Yeah, beautiful question. So this is what I like to nerd out and explain it. So the very first thing to understand is the majority of people in crypto are like ignoring this. It's like the big elephant in the room that they don't want to acknowledge. And the reason they don't want to acknowledge it is because obviously the regulation means comes laws. And as citizens, we have to follow those laws. So all these people in crypto like to say, oh, they can't touch Bitcoin. Governments can't affect it. Maybe not. Maybe they can't affect the Bitcoin like network, but they can affect you, the user, right? So one of the things you can expect the regulations is any project that comes out, they need to be verifiable for the users. What I mean by that is this can be an anonymous way for the network, but governments have access to the addresses and who owns them. So that'll be attached to digital IDs. And people will be outraged in crypto thinking the government's going to know my address. Well, you got to think of it this way. It's like a stock account. It's like an investment account because there is value in that crypto address where you have your crypto, right? So you got to think of it like an investment account where it has to be identity verified. There has to be rules and regulations attached to the investments, right? It's a whole new game. So you can expect that coming with regulations. That's also a really good indicator is which projects are aligning with that, which projects know that that's the way it's going to go, because governments are already saying this. So if they're saying it, they're going to do it, right? And this is a big deal with it because that is the step one. That's the easiest step to see if someone's going to align with regulations or not. Are they trying to stay anonymous, or are they creating anonymous digital IDs that governments can have access to on that network? Like Hedera is doing it, right? That's the one example I gave before. So that's a really good indicator for regulations. And what we can expect in 2024 for them is Europe is starting phase one in June. So it's only a few months away. Phase one regulations, and then they're going to be fully in by January 1st, 2025, I believe. So within the next, we're in March. Oh yeah, we're in March now. So within the next 10 months, Europe's good to go, fully regulated.
Wow.
And then Canada
And
is, sorry, Canada
sorry, go
is,
ahead.
yeah, Canada is pretty solid for regulations already, and they're obviously going to be heavy behind Europe. However, they haven't really said when the rest are coming out. They're still doing their due diligence phase right now, collecting feedback from the public. And the Americans, people like to believe the Americans are sleeping, but they're not. They already have regulations going through their political system, and it's already starting to get teased out. So that's within the next year as well, it looks like.
Yeah, and that there's so much within what you just said. So
I know, right?
apologies for getting excited there. Um, I think first of all, it will give investors a lot of solace, I think, in certain cases, maybe not the hardcore crypto investors to date, but those who are looking to enter into this, I think it's a really, positive indicator for them that maybe they will feel more comfortable making investments towards blockchain technology, knowing that there is going to be a little bit more oversight to it. Um, and knowing that perhaps that takes some of that risk off of the table when it comes to those particular tokens that are going to be regulated appropriately. I don't think it's a negative. I perceive it as a positive from that perspective. Obviously, we're talking about maybe public versus private a little bit as well, and maybe the bifurcation of where regulations sit. But that, I think, for a lot of people who are potentially nervous about investing in blockchain, that should give them some solace. With regulation, my brain can't help but to think to go to tax. So if there is, an ID attached to someone's account, that likely means that there's going to be some ability for governments to have more insight on the types of investing activities that are going on. So can you talk to me a little bit about your perspective on that?
Yeah, so that's absolutely where it's headed, and it's going to be all automated as well. So this could really make it easy for, in Canada, be the Canada Revenue Agency, the CRA. And so what this will do is like, it just, since all the records are stored, it won't mean that they're going to get paid tax in real time, but it means by the end of the year, they'll know exactly what you owe. There'll be no ifs, ands, or buts about it because it's all digital
Right.
recorded. And that's not a bad thing because if you're an investor and you're making money, profit's profit, take it. Right? um,
Mhm.
Now, what this really makes a difference in it kind of ties to, you just mentioned governments having more regulatory oversight, and this kind of ties to with them knowing what's going on in the address. It goes well with what's called initial coin offerings. So you know how stocks, there's IPOs, and they have to regulate the
Mhm.
company going public. Well, right now in crypto, there isn't that, and anyone can buy a random project, a random meme coin, because anyone can create a coin, right? And then people can buy and put on their wallet address. Well, now governments can have rules and regulations of what exactly is allowed. So step one is, what are you holding? What are you allowed to hold versus what's illegal? So like a privacy token that's meant to be engaged in money laundering operations, the government might say, hey, your digital ID is banned from holding that. And that's more of a kind of makes sense sort of thing. But the other thing
Mhm.
is not just anyone can create a token. I kind of want to mention that too with my last question as well. So that's a big one because right now that mitigates your risk. The governments are going to want to take control of that because right now we have, I think, 28,000 different cryptos. The vast majority don't
Wild.
do anything, right? So it's going to be tied to not only your user, what they're doing, what they're holding, but also who can create it. So it all goes together.
Got it. So you want to be on the right side of this at the end of the day, I
I
think
believe,
when,
sorry, I don't
and
mean to interrupt you, but like I believe
yeah,
grown adults will cry when this day comes. No, I don't mean to sound negative, but some people might be slammed with it because they didn't see the truth coming or they didn't want to accept it.
mm.
I'm not trying to preach doom and gloom. I'm just saying this is a risk to hold the assets that go against what the regulations say. Let's just say that.
So then where do investors go for the type of advice as to which ones are on the right side of regulation or the wrong side? Is that something that your company points people in the direction of, or how can somebody begin to approach this?
Yeah, so like I'll give an example that I give in my online courses where I teach people what to look for when they're researching. It's just kind of set variables, right? So it goes with a simple checklist of what is the project doing? So like what is their thesis to their company? What problem are they solving? How is a network structured? So you kind of want to look into how the network is built. Does it cater to its use case of what the problem it's solving? And then you want to look at who they're partnered with and who they're rumored to be partnered with, because a lot of times right now with rumors, there was smoke, there's fire, and then that kind of gives you a bigger picture because right now it's all about how do I lower my risk. From we have all this unknown, I want to make all that unknown more known. And so when you ask yourself these questions, it kind of bridges that gap right now. So that is a great way for investors to approach this. And they take that kind of checklist of questions and you start to see the vast majority don't meet those questions. But it does narrow down a small list of around 15 who do meet that. There's probably might even be a few more than 15, but
That
or at least more than 15 in the near future because more are still going to start coming out because you can't keep track of all of them, right? But there are some
yeah,
great people on Twitter. There's some great people on YouTube who do post this kind of information for free so people can follow them. And like I say to everyone I worked with is like, you're the composer. It's your orchestra. The music plays for you. Let your band play for you. So go on Twitter, find your instruments to play for you. Go on YouTube, find your instruments to play for you. And then you're the one who decides what's good and what's not. Right? So that's what I
got it.
recommend to people.
And I don't believe, at least not to my knowledge, that there are any licensed advisors who provide specific advice on what to buy or sell in this market. Um, am I correct in that sentiment?
I believe not, but like I know there are people who do run crypto funds here in Canada. So I'm trying to think whether if you run a crypto fund, do you know if they would be able to get financial advice?
Probably not, other than to talk about their own fund, would be
Yeah.
my guess.
Yeah.
So the onus at this point, I think, and it still is very early stage, is on the individual to do their own due diligence and research. And I know from when I used to work on a brokerage team, we would get asked questions around, buying, into Bitcoin. This was years ago now. Um, Realistically, we didn't have any more information than the client does. So I think often if someone is going to approach their investment advisor, I think with a grain of salt, the investment advisor is probably not an expert in investing in the blockchain unless this is something that they're pouring time and attention and energy into. So perhaps just making sure the investor does their own proper due diligence, irrespective of who they talk to, even if it is a licensed securities advisor. The securities course does not cover anything to do with crypto. So I think that's just an important differentiation to make there. Um, I want to take it back for 1 second and back to crypto as an investment. So we talked a little bit about what coins are going to be on the right sides of regulations, but if we're comparing this to investing in traditional investment instruments like stocks and bonds, a lot of times people are investing not just to make money on the capital gains component of investing, but also through the passive generation of income, like dividends and interest, for example. So within crypto, I believe there is something that is called staking, which is equivalent to earning some sort of capital on the money that you've invested. So can you talk to us about what staking is and maybe how that compares to the passive income that you could generate through traditional investments?
Yeah, for sure. So before we start this question, let's tell your followers too that this might seem a little complicated at first, but I'll do my best to break it down. But it's all good. It's one
Perfect.
of those things that might take a few listens to get it, and that's totally fine, especially for people who are just starting out. So staking is a form of contributing to the consensus of a network. So the consensus being how the networks run, how the validators confirm transactions, making sure they're following the network rules. So a lot of forms in staking where there's a node, and that node or validator can verify transactions coming in. Now, a lot of staking projects, the more coins a node or validator has locked up in it, the more likely it's chosen to validate the next transaction. When they validate the next transaction, they receive the transaction fee as the reward for doing so. Now, obviously, if you're a node and you need more coins, the more coins you get, the more likely to be chosen, which means you're going to get more fees, right? So what they do is they open a pool so you can stake to them. They run the node, and then they share a portion of their fees with you. And all you have to do is just click a button and you stake with them. So you don't have to run the full node. You're staking to a pool, it's called. And so it's a great way to earn passive income, especially in the near future when regulations will be make sure it's very, very stable, right? And these projects are capturing all the world's money because these are going to grow exponentially. And I'll give a quick example with this, right? So there's a project called VeChain. It's one of my favorites, so people can look it up on their own time. They're partnered with T-Mobile, Verizon, LMVH, which is the parent company of like Tag Heuer,
Yeah.
Louis Vuitton. They have all these massive partnerships, right? And they have a staking program. And they actually have a two token system. We're not going to get too deep into it, but when you stake VeChain, you earn their second token, which is VETHO. And I bought it in I think 2018, I believe, and in 2021 I sold my VETHO rewards and I made like I think it was like $1,800 US in just passive income that one time, just from that little bit of staking.
Mhm.
and the value of it all went up in the bull run. So I made $1,800 on that one product just for free. My friend, actually today we checked his VeChain rewards because he's doing the same thing, and right now his Visa rewards up to $600 just in passive income. Right now,
Yeah,
the earlier you buy these projects, if you buy earlier, you get more tokens to stake. Right now, imagine you get a lot of tokens bought early, and then everything explodes after regulations because those are the products that are chosen on the worldwide stage. Now you have all that value plus the staking coming in. It's going to be way more than a $600 or 1,000. People that may actually
right.
be able to live off of it.
How would someone figure out which coins are being staked and which ones aren't?
So a quick Google search, you can say like, is Hedera staking or this or that? So the easiest way is to just Google it. Now, but also keep in mind that this landscape for staking and contributing your crypto to a pool for rewards will change, especially with regulations, because banks are going to get involved. And you can bet they will
Right.
because they have patents for crypto staking on their own platform because obviously they want it, right?
Of
So
course.
in the near
Yeah.
future, the next couple of years, you'll be able to even stake your crypto through your bank. So you can custody with them.
Got it.
You'll have in your bank account just like your stocks. It'll all be obviously through your ID. It'll be beautiful, nice and easy for those kind of people. So you'll be able to stake them even through different products. So banks will have different products you can stake to, even in, I guess, in a way that's not contributing to the network, but more for a bank. Like you kind of lend them the money sort of thing, and you get interest on loans,
Hmm.
so to speak. So that's it. That's a totally different thing that'll be coming. So one thing I recommend to people is keep an eye on it if you're going to research it because different products are going to come out, especially post regulations.
Got it. And as a percentage, I know, we talk about dividend investing, and is there any sort of range that you can get as staking rewards right now? Like if you had to estimate as a percentage, or even just ballpark it?
Yeah, so like an example would be a product called Cardano. I'll be honest, not one of my favorites. Doesn't mean it's a bad one, but I believe that they have different pools that range from 4 to 6%.
Okay.
XRP Ripple is looking to create something called an automated market maker feature, which will allow theoretically staking for XRP, and that's looking
Hmm.
about 4 to 6%, maybe even more. So it could
Got
be
it.
okay, be pretty lucrative. Now, if you nail this and say you make 100 million, right, and you stake 50 million, you earn 4 to 6% of 50 million. That's what we're talking, right?
Wow. I mean, those are some big numbers you're throwing out there.
Yeah,
But,
I like to
you
use
know,
those numbers because it happened with Bitcoin. People bought Bitcoin so early, and
right,
they made hundreds of millions of dollars off a few $100. So
right.
this is
That's
the real big
crazy.
wave. This is the utility run coming after regulations. So I know the numbers sound crazy to most people, but it's happened already with normal people, everyday people who just put a couple $100 in Bitcoin when it was early. So why not now?
Yeah. Yeah. And just as an overall caveat, this doesn't construe investment advice at all.
No, 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 no.
But I think, the takeaway message is there's a lot of opportunity that people should just start to do their own research, and kind of open your eyes a little bit to what's already happening. I think the takeaway that I get from all of this is you just have to look a little bit, and kind of go down that rabbit hole, just to be aware, just aware of what's happening around you. It, one thing I wanted to circle back to. I know we're coming up on time, but it is an election year in the U.S., and I know that you mentioned U.S. regulations are potentially coming, within the year. If there is a change in leadership in the U.S., does that impact anything here
In Canada or in the States?
in the States? Let's
Yeah.
say,
I believe it definitely will because certain
yeah,
organizations might be more crypto friendly than others, so to speak. But in the end, um, based on when you look at the research where the patents are going, the patents for banks, especially because they had these crypto patents for over 10 years now, and they all almost sing the same tune. So to me, it's like, how are they all like on the same level? They understand the same products, same services, same wording. Almost, it's almost like they understand what's coming. So to me, it's
right.
like on paper there might be an election year, but the regulations are kind of behind the scenes that won't really get changed unless they want some specific tweaks. I can see that, but based on what everyone's preparing for, it kind of seems set in stone.
Got it. So we could see some deviations to plan, but longer term, it should probably keep going the way it's been going for a while.
Yeah.
Um,
I just want to make sure one thing here too, just to go with your point there. Regulations are taking so long because you have like think of the US government, you have the SEC which is in charge of stocks, right? So they're going to have to tackle tokenized stocks. You have the CFTC which is in charge of commodities. So what happens if you tokenize commodities? They're going to have to tackle that. Well, stable coins are fiat backed crypto. So obviously the US Treasury is going to have to get involved. So you can see all the political, like all the government structures go, hey, who's going to tackle what here? So behind the
Right.
scenes, like those kind of stay the same through the regimes. So that's why I'm saying the regulations are going to be catering to the specific organizations. They know what they're going to have to tackle. So yeah, president might be able to change a few things here and there, but the government agencies will know what needs to be added based on their own structure and what they tackle themselves.
Sure. Yeah. So maybe red tape is still red tape no matter what way you cut it.
Yeah.
Um, One last point I wanted to, it's related to investing, but in a different way. But something that you talked about a while ago was other use cases of the blockchain outside of investing directly in the blockchain. So one thing was around fractional share ownership. Um, this is a really interesting idea to me, specifically when it comes to real estate. I have a lot of clients who love to invest in real estate, who have a lot of wealth trapped in their principal residences, because in Canada, our principal residence is a tax free asset. So, how is blockchain potentially going to change our approach to real estate investing?
So it's in the exact word you mentioned before, tokenized shares, and it actually is a pretty big game changer. It's already being done now, and weirdly, it's already being done in the States actually. So what that
Oh,
means is you take the real estate deed and you tokenize it. So easy example would be, let's do a commercial example, or at least a big residential example. So let's do an apartment building. So say you're the
okay.
property owner of a big apartment building and you tokenize the deed and you can say the value of this property is, we'll hypothetically say $10 million. So I tokenize this $10 million real estate deed. I want to sell 20% of this property. So I'm going to take $2 million and create all these crypto tokens that represent a portion of my property. And you can sell it to the public. You can create as many as you want. The price will just be relative to whatever the property is. So then you'll be able to have people who can come in and buy a token or two for like $100. So you can put $100 into real estate because you're buying a small fraction of that property. Now the owner gets to keep 80%, but they just liquidated 20% and got all that money from the free market. And the people who bought the token will receive like the rental income for whatever portion they bought. So it's a
Right.
pretty cool
That
thing.
this can have so many applications. I was
Oh
going to
yeah,
say, from commercial all the way down the line, if it comes to that, and hopefully it will. There's just so much trapped wealth inside of bricks, literally. And there's products out there like reverse mortgages that attempt to unlock the value for investors in their own homes or in investment properties. So I can imagine that this would be an opportunity for those who have a lot of wealth that's trapped and don't necessarily want to sell your entire property in order to liquidate it, or don't want to be forced to do so. Is that a really good use case for this?
it's a really beautiful use case because you can sell a portion of your property to people, and you can, if you need cash, you can use a fraction, not the whole mortgage. You can use a fraction of your property as a to back a loan, right? So if you need a loan for somebody, you can use like 20%
Hmm.
of your real estate deed, and the bank gets at 20%. It'll be in their wallet, but on the blockchain, you'll know where it is, right? So it kind of
Right.
unlocks all these different opportunities that we haven't seen before. What I'll do is the project is the real estate one in the states is it's on a project called Algorand. It's another really great one if people want to research. They're partnered with 16 central banks. We only know two. I believe it's the Dutch Central Bank and the Bank of Italy, but the other ones are under
Wow.
NDAs. So they're working pretty heavily with big government banks, right? But they have that tokenized real estate platform on their chain. And I forget the name of it, but I'll send it to you. Maybe you can send it out to everyone as well so they can see firsthand and go on the website and check it out.
Yeah, that's really, really exciting stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, there's so much applicability, I think, overall to how far blockchain can transform the entire system. Is there any lasting or takeaway message that you would like to leave everybody watching this today with?
Yeah. My biggest message, and it might sound a little cheesy to start with, is always trust your gut. I have people who they understand that there's potential here, but they get so stressed out with going in. They just listen. It's not meant for you. That's totally fine. There's other opportunities within your own investment thesis. Other people might be like, I'm just going to jump in the deep end. That's totally fine too. It all depends on what suits you best and what caters to your gut feeling. So right now, people will be listening to this and they might hear information that they never heard before, might get them excited, might even get them worried because they're like, oh, I don't have the time to learn all this, or I don't have the time to do this. And that's totally fine too. So last thing I want people to do is get caught in FOMO, the fear of missing out, right? Like you mentioned earlier, how people get caught in their emotions. So again, with all this information, I didn't know I threw like information overload to everybody. So my lasting message is trust your gut. You always know what's best for you, and the right things will always come to you.
Thank you. And Skyler, where can people find your company?
Online. We can put the website down below or in the
Perfect.
description of this, but it's just ascendcrypto.com.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Um, Thank you so much, Skyler. I could continue to talk about this for hours. Maybe we'll do another one in the future, post June regulations, and see how the landscape has changed. That will be really interesting.
Yeah, and talk
But
about how
for
we nailed
now,
it all, right?
thank you. Or you probably do more than I do, but yes, absolutely. So thankful for your time today and last week, and much appreciate everything that you had to say today. I know that I learned more, and hopefully our listeners did as well. So with that, thank you so much.